Chief
Oh, I
McDonald.
know. Oh, I know.
So I mean, that's what we
Ladies and
thought.
gentlemen, please, get started.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Anthony. I'm the instrumental director for Nauset Regional High School. At this time, we'd like to open tonight's meeting with some music from our string quartet. They're going to be playing the national anthem. Please stand. Thank you.
Ready to go. It's time. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming. This is the first public forum for the Nauset Regional Building School Project. Just to give you a quick background, a year ago, next week, the 22nd of January 2017, the building committee met for the first time. We are 15 citizens, individuals of the Nauset District, appointed by the school committee to run a feasibility study for Nauset Regional High School. The town's voted $1.5 million to start the process of looking at what Nauset Regional High School needs for the next 40 to 50 years to fulfill its mission of educating students on the Lower Cape. It's a two-prong approach, and you're going to hear a lot about acronyms and a lot of different syllables, vowels tonight, but if you get lost in the shuffle and don't understand what any of those acronyms mean, raise your hand, we'll try to figure it out for you. So we have a two-prong approach. The first one is an educational plan, and that's what a lot of us you hear about tonight, what Nauset is going to be teaching for courses for the next 30 to 40 years. And that is why we're here tonight, asking citizens' input, towns, everybody's input as to what you would like to see people learning in your public schools. The second part of the process is looking at the physical plant of Nauset Regional High School. It was originally occupied in January 1972. There was a small renovation, $10.5 million in 1996. And most of the place is 40 some odd years old. It has systems that have far outlived its usefulness. And it's looking a little long in the tooth in some places. So the educational plan is going to show us what we need to teach and what we want to teach. And this other plan is going to show us what we need to do to renovate the buildings and or add new spaces where we can't renovate to meet certain codes. All this process is overseen by the Mass School Building Assistants group up in Boston, MSBA. They control the purse strings, they also set the guidelines, and they have the bureaucracy in place to help us out and double check to make sure we're hitting certain guideposts. They have 2 staff individuals named just for our project, and they work with us and our professional consultants to make sure that we get to where we need to be in order to get the process going and move forward and ask the citizens for the next phase. So we have 2 groups. The first one is OPM, stands for Owner Project Manager. That's the data list group. Mr. Sullivan, Christina Opper, and Richard Marks. Oh, right there, sorry. Next, we have, we hired them, and after that, we hired the Flansburgh design team, Flansburgh Architects, and Kent's right here, he's their representative. He's working with us, he's the lead architect in our group. He has a group of engineers and other specialists that have been around the campus and looking at what we need to do to, as I said, move forward. So at this point, I just want to put a plug in for the next 3 meetings. All 4 towns are going to have at least 1 round. Eastham is the 29th of January at 6 p.m. at their town hall. Wellfleet is the 30th of January at 6 p.m. I think it's their town hall. And Brewster's the 31st at 6 p.m. in Brewster Town Hall. And we picked the town halls for the first round simply because these rooms have TV, it can be recorded, and it can be broadcast. So the other groups, I'm not too sure where we're going to meet, but we want as much input from citizens as possible. This is your school, this is our place, this is our home, and we want everybody to have a chance to put in their 2 cents as to what they'd like to see. If you've had students go through this, you've been a student at Nauset High School, you have grandchildren there, you have an input that we want to hear, and that's why we're here tonight. So I'll hand it off to Mr. Conrad, Superintendent of Schools.
So first of all, thank you for taking some of your own personal time to come here and begin to understand a little bit about this process and where we are and where we hope to go. The history of this is that a little over 3.5 years ago, we were concerned about a number of factors relative to the campus in North Eastham. And we currently have a student population of about 950 students. And at times, we have struggled to have the adequate number of classrooms and so forth. And it was decided that in reaching out to the MSBA, that we would become active in what we know is the Statement of Interest. And the Statement of Interest was a document that through the MSBA, we could tell our story relative to the facility and the shortcomings of the facility. A committee was formed, and at that time, we went through the entire campus and raised some of our concerns relative to the educational program and some of the deficiencies of the facility. And we knew going into this process that on average, when the MSBA gets involved in this process, it has taken up to 5 years to be selected to come into the program, to be having the possibility of using their program as the spring to get this started. We had them down, they came down to visit the 2nd year of our work. We were allowed to give them a 1-hour visit and tour of the campus, and within days they called to tell us that they were going to accept us into the program in the 2nd year. We were shocked, quite honestly. And that triggered our efforts to move forward and come in front of the voters of the 4 towns for asking for $1.3 million to come into the feasibility study going forward as we move forward. So I'm going to kick it off to Richard Marks at this point to start telling the story of once we're in the feasibility study, and how does this whole process move forward for you to understand. So, Richard, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
So good evening, everybody, and thank you. Like Tom said, we really appreciate you being here and sharing with us and us being able to share with you some of the knowledge about the project. This is a list of the school building committee members that Greg referred to. I'm sure you know some, if not all of the members, but feel free to reach out to them individually or come to one of our school building committee meetings, which are posted. We also have a project website that's just up and running that's going to have all the agendas and the meeting minutes, and we'll be able to give you more information about that. So a lot of information that's going to be coming out about the project that if you can come to the meeting, great, but if you can't, you'll be able to look at it on the web. So as Tom said, through the MSBA designer selection process, there were 5 architects that submitted, and Flansburgh was fortunate enough to be selected. And so maybe Kent, just say a couple quick words about your firm.
Yep. Thank you, Richard. Yeah, we were delighted to be selected for this project. We think it's incredible, and the educational possibilities are endless. Flansburgh, we've been focused on educational work for over 50 years. That's kind of our bread and butter, and we really feel that we bring a lot to the table when it comes to look at campuses such as yours and some of the unique and really forward-thinking programs that you have. So we can't wait to kind of dig into it and, as a group, kind of unravel what this plan will be moving forward. And that really is what the feasibility study is about that Richard's going to explain. And with me is David Stephen from New Vista Design.
Hi, everybody. So I'm from New Vista Design. I'm working on the Flansburgh team as the educational planner. I work on a lot of MSBA projects. I have a background as both an architect and an educator, more as an educator than an architect, and that's really how I lead this process. The MSBA, and we'll be telling you more about this process over the course of the evening, feels that it's very important to work closely with schools to help them craft a very forward-thinking vision for their school and their new buildings, because they want to make sure whatever investment the state is making is one that is very forward-thinking. So we embarked upon a process. Have been speaking to a lot of people. Want to hear what your thoughts are tonight as well, and we'll be sharing with you more information about that process tonight.
Thanks, Ken and David. While we're titled the Owner's Project Manager, and as Greg said, there are three of us here tonight. Christina Opper on our right, she's still working on over there, and Joe Sullivan to my immediate right. And we will be the team, the core team that will be working with the school district for the next few years. We'll show you a slide a little later on about the overall time frame. Daedalus has been in business for 30 years. I had the pleasure of working with Mr. Flansburgh, Earl Flansburgh, who founded Kent's firm 35 years ago. So I have been doing this for a little while. But we've done several large high school projects as owner's project manager. So they include a new building in Boston that just opened in September, Franklin High School, that opened 2 years ago. We have a problem in Franklin. We have twice had to bring in more lockers because more kids are going to the school than we anticipated. So 200 additional students over and above what we originally designed for. Rockland High School, which was a major renovation and addition project, and Leominster, which was also a small addition, major renovation. Belmont High School, which is going to be essentially all new construction, $295 million new school project in Belmont, serving grades 7 to 12, interestingly. And then King Philip High School, Joe and I worked on several years ago, which was also an addition renovation. So we have a gamut of renovation, addition, and new construction projects around the Commonwealth. And that's really going to be a theme that you're going to hear throughout this discussion, is that we don't have preconceived notions, anyone on the team, about exactly what the solution is for this project. We keep calling it a project because that's the construction part. As soon as it's not a project, it's a school again. So we're really going to work with you, the communities, with the administration, with the teachers who've been working, with Kent, of course, on coming up with a solution that makes sense for the Nauset Regional District, and we don't have preconceived notions. That's why we're coming here at this early stage to the community to hear from you. So this is called, as Greg said, the feasibility phase. It will take about 6 months. We're about 2 months into it, or 3 months into it. And you've heard a lot already about the MSBA. And Greg said that they are overseeing the project. They would say that there are partners in the project. It depends on where you sit as to what you believe. So the MSBA is, in my opinion, and I've looked at this across the nation, the best of the school assistance organizations that work at a statewide level. Why is that? They get 1 penny of, and that's the third bullet here, 1 penny of every sales tax dollar spent. So you pay 6.25%, so do I. One of those 6.25 cents goes to fund school construction. So that gives them a dedicated revenue stream. It's about $640 million per year that goes toward school construction. Because of Amazon and other online retailers, those sales tax revenues have been increasing recently, not flat as many other tax revenues have been. So the MSBA, as a result, has been able to fund more projects. They fund anywhere from 10 to 15, as much as I think 18 at the most, of what they call their core program projects. And they fund that based upon what they can what they realize is going to be the revenues to back up those projects. So if they're doing 2 or 3 large high schools like Belmont, obviously they can do fewer elementary schools. Nauset, at this stage, represents probably a little bit above average in terms of cost, but not certainly the most costly projects that are out there. You have a friend at the MSBA board level. There are only 7 members of the board. So Sheila Vanderhoff has fairly recently become part of the MSBA board. And really what everybody thinks about is how much is the MSBA going to pay for? Because these are dollars that the local communities won't have to contribute. So for the feasibility study, they're going to pay 37.95% of all costs for the feasibility study. For the construction project, it will be a little bit higher. It'll be about 41% of eligible costs. So eligible costs are capped for various categories, so the effective reimbursement will be more like 30% of the cost. Don't quote me on that because we don't know what the solution will be until we get a little farther into it. But as soon as we start to develop that solution and develop budgets, we'll be able to tell you exactly how much the state is going to pick up of the cost versus how much the local towns will have to pick up. So it'll be an interesting process, and we will look at, because of the way the reimbursement works, renovation actually does get some bonus points. So they promote renovation projects by adding to the reimbursement as much as 5% if we were to do an all renovation project. So that 40 that I mentioned goes up to 45. So it's a big difference. So this whole process is outlined on the MSBA website, which is actually quite good. It's a little boring if you're not in the business as we are, but on the lower right, you'll see massschoolbuildings.org. And it has a number of tabs in there. It has the schedule of their board meetings. It has this process and many others. So as the superintendent said, you've been through Module 1, which is up at the top. It's a little hard to read, but the eligibility period, which was about, what, a 2-year period, roughly. We weren't hired yet. That was something the district did. We get hired under Module 2, forming the project team, and that includes, as Greg said, hiring us and then hiring Flansburgh. These are through competitive processes. We submit our qualifications. We come to you, and we were selected for this project. We're happy, very happy about that. So we're moving now into Module 3, which is that feasibility study. There's still 5 more to go, and that includes schematic design, which will take place from June to December, and then then funding the project. That's probably the hardest part of any project today, is funding the project, because we'll need votes from 4 towns, all of which will have, and those of you who are familiar with Cape Cod Tech know it's essentially exactly the same process, except they had, what, 12 towns? So we have an easier task, right? And then once the project is funded in Module 5, there will be about a year-long design process, and then we'll actually start construction. So it's a long road ahead of all of us, but it's worth it. The skinny guy on the right looks familiar to me, but this is really a slide showing that we've already started working in partnership. 2 of the members that Greg mentioned from the MSBA came down and spent a couple of hours. Kent's not in the slide because he took the pictures, but he really worked with us to make sure that the MSBA really had a good understanding at the staff level of exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And actually, Becca Whidden, who's in the gray jacket, is an architect, which is a little unusual to have an architect as our project manager. So I think that's great because this building is so architecturally oriented. I'm going on a little long. I'll cut it off here, but MSBA process is laid out, as I said, on the website, but what we're doing now is, and Greg summarized it, existing conditions, visioning, programming, and preliminary options. That's why you're here. Over the next couple of months, we'll be refining those those options and doing some preliminary cost estimates, selecting a preferred option, again, hopefully for a board meeting in June, and then developing that option through December, and then finally going on, and that's actually April, May 2020, and Christina's already changing the slide, April, May 2020, that we'll be looking for local funding. this is that milestone schedule. And this one is kind of a fun but scary graphic schedule that shows. So if you started, we're obviously in the beginning of 2019. We're projecting that the construction will go all the way till 2024. So we hope to see all of you at the groundbreaking then. I'll kick it off on that note to Kent and talk a little bit more specifically, as well as David, about some of what we'll be doing. Thank you very much.
And first, what we'd like to do is, I think we should, have everybody take 2 minutes, and there's a piece of paper in front of
Piece
you.
of paper on your tables. We have more people than we initially expected, so if you need a piece of paper, we'll grab some more. But what we'd like to do is, we're gonna be sharing a bunch with you tonight about the priorities that have been established so far in the various working groups that we've held. But we wanna hear from you all about what you're most concerned about, excited about. And this is something that, in terms of any of the information that we are collecting, we are recording it all, we're consolidating the information, and it will be available on a website, the school's website, or a website that will be made sort of especially for the project in the very near future. And if you we'll collect these, if you would like to leave them with us. But the task that I'd ask you to do now is just take 2 or 3 minutes to write down what your top 2 or 3 priorities are as you think about this project. They could be academic priorities, they could be architectural priorities, they could be budgetary priorities, community-oriented, whatever is at the top of your mind about the priorities for this. And then what we're gonna do is just quickly go around the room, have everybody introduce themselves and sort of where they are in the community, and share one priority, and I'll be recording them, okay? But if you have more than one priority that you would like to make sure that we have access to, feel free to write a bunch of them down, and we'll make sure to collect them. Just write legibly so we can transcribe them. So 2 or 3 minutes, just what your top priorities are. And if you don't have one, that's fine. You can just introduce yourself.
There are plenty of other spaces at the tables, so those folks sitting up against the wall, please make yourselves at home and have a seat. Makes it easier to write if you're not sitting in a chair. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have people just,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, so we do have a lot of people, so I'm gonna ask that people limit it to one priority. I know you may have a bunch of things at top of your mind. I'm willing to bet that by the time we get around the group, that priority might have been mentioned by somebody else, and if not, we'll open it up again for more priorities to be shared. So I guess we'll just go around the room, and you're the lucky number one. If you could just
I'm supposed
introduce.
to introduce myself?
Yeah, just say your name.
My name's Becky Carroll, a parent of elementary school and middle
Okay,
school students.
great. And what's the priority, Becky?
Number 1, safety for students and faculty and staff.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes,
Ron Collins, resident of Orleans. As a facilities manager, building code compliance and anticipating future needs.
okay. All right, and you know what I might do is, I might ask you, Kent, to maybe sort of facilitate going around, because it's a little hard for me to write quickly and do that at the same time. So in the interest of time, would you like to do that?
I'll give it a shot.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, please.
Lynn Brunel, I'm a resident of Orleans and also the chairman of the finance committee here in Orleans. So leveraging or picking up on what Ron left off with, talking about adaptability, but I went to a science school up in Cambridge. Adaptability for science and technology space over time. Right now, we're working on drones and the internet's hot, but what's it gonna be in 5 years, and in 10 years, and in 20 years? So adaptability of things like labs and so on and so on.
Great, thank you. Sir?
Well, this is Genevieve Smith, I'm Greg Smith, and she will probably be in first class.
That's right, yeah.
On construction. All for her. And I actually went to Nauset, and I am concerned about maintaining the existing integrity of the campus, the building, walking outside, the college-type campus.
Okay, great.
John?
Hi, my name is John Poor, resident of Orleans. My wife Mary, we've got 3 boys that are in elementary and middle school. I would say, something along the lines of building being able to adapt with how much technology is changing, and in the workforce, it's open layouts, then so something that can really adapt over probably decades and can deal with the challenges that you mentioned.
Yeah. Mary?
I'll second him.
All right. Chris?
So Chris Easley, I serve on the school committee. I guess one of my big things I'd like to see is just a dynamic educational environment that is able to transition with technology as it advances.
Al?
Yes, Alan McLennan, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I want to see a creative design and educational programs that attract families with students to the Outer Cape. That's all.
I'll get you in a minute.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm Kevin Galligan, I'm also on the Board of Selectmen in Orleans, kind of the energy geek in the room. So Kent might recognize me from another project, but I really want to see that you set a zero energy use goal for the entire facility. That's on an annual basis. I think it's really been shown that setting these targets and not breaking them by value engineering will be able to show a productive space. It's more healthy, and certainly we know energy cost is usually the 3rd or 4th highest cost after you pay the bills for the staff and the bonds. Usually energy cost is the 3rd, so this is really a must with me.
Brian?
Brian Kavanaugh, attended school in '87, have 5 children in school, and former regional school committee member myself. My interest concerns are sort of the intersection of sizing and cost. I think we need to keep those factors in line. The number of students that we have is probably puts us in a very unique position. The idea that we have 905 or 950 when the reality is Nauset students from 4 towns are closer to 600, I think makes us very unique. And that 600 is something that's been in steep decline. And the other part of the equation is in terms of how much residents of the 4 towns are already paying on a per pupil basis, puts us, of the 322 schools in the state, somewhere around 4th most expensive. So I think we need to keep that intersection in mind. Should we really be building a school for nearly 1,000 students when we only have 600, it's declining? And can the taxpayers really handle the additional burden of the money on top of being arguably the 4th most expensive per pupil?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Hank Schumacher, Orleans School Committee, and I have 4 grandkids in elementary school. They'll be, won't be in here because they'll be all out by that time. I think number 1 is making it into a community center and with a swimming pool and a field house and open space for concerts.
The rooms are, yes, sir.
John Sinopoli, 2 students who've been through the system and some years ago. And I would like to tie in with what Kevin had said about the energy. I'd like to have software data available to the teachers and the students so that they can actually see what's happening in their school community that may cause them to become more community-minded as grown adults when they get there. So I'd like that software to be available so the teachers could use the data in their regular classes.
Ma'am?
Sandra Roach. I'm on the Orleans School Committee, and I have a 3rd grader and a 5th grader at Orleans Elementary. I was thinking along the same lines as Hank. It's very important to me that with our unique community here, that community space is built and that The schools are open to everyone, that we can benefit from all ages in one spot.
Ma'am? No? Behind. Yeah, up against the door.
Yes.
Mary Ann Sinopoli, the other half of John Sinopoli. I'm the outreach librarian for the Eastham Public Library. I'm personally very interested in the use of the school as a community venue. I chair the Eastham Turnip Festival. The high school has been home for the festival for several years now, so I'm curious as we move forward into the future, what options will be available to the library to collaborate and hold our town festival there, in addition to agreeing with much of what's already been said.
Gail Breyer, I'm the chair of the Orleans School Committee. And there are so many things that you could list here, but I think one of the things two things that really come to mind for me is adaptability to meet the changing needs of our society, whether that be technology or the types of programs, the academic programs that we do, but also affordability. Can we, what can we afford?
Giovanna?
Giovanna Venditti, Director of Finance and Operations for the district. And I'd like to see the excellent education continue for the next 50 years with a building that will sustain holistically the student population. Like Gail said, it's no longer about just the education piece. There's a lot of other factors as educators that we need to provide our students.
Dr. Peretti?
Ann Carretti, Director of Student Services. I'd like to see, and it's already been said, transformative space to meet the community's desires, and a space where kids and faculty are safe, as had been said before.
Sir?
Josh Stewart. I'm going to break the rules and say two things just because my wife is home with the kids and she made me say something. So the first is her primary concern, and mine as well, is just the impact on the students in programming during construction, knowing that we've got kids that will be cycling through the high school at that time, and in an era of school choice where there are excellent opportunities outside of the region, I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we rehab in a responsible way that allows that continuance of an excellent Nauset education. So I think it could be done, hopefully it can be done well. My biggest excitement about the project is opportunities to add and create new programming at the school that will be unique to Nauset in the Outer Cape. That I see kind of a homogenization of education as we all try to do what everyone else is doing to compete with each other. And I think it is important to remain unique and also look at the future that we're heading, sending our kids off to. Might very well keep them on Cape Cod, and having some opportunity to at least explore the trades at the high school would be awesome. So I think that it would be really neat to find some new avenues towards being different than everyone else.
Okay. Mr. Sinclair?
I'm Bob Sinclair on the Regional School Committee. Like Alan McLennan, I happen to believe that the quality of schools influences the nature of the quality of the community. So I would like to see a school that plan that pays attention to what the teachers think are important for ensuring quality, so that the teachers are the people who drive the nature of what the physical plant is going to look like, because they're the people, I think, who are closest to students, know most about what they do well and what they're having difficulty with. So they, as professional educators, are the people who know best what kind of physical spaces they need in order to be effective in their work. To that end, I think it's very important that the space include ways for a place, a setting, for teachers to be able to join together, to talk with each other, to debate, to discuss and decide important issues about the learning of young people. And to that end, I prepared 2 papers addressing the issue of how evaluation on the part of the teachers influences learning, so that you can if you choose to, look at these companion papers for the purpose of finding out what it means for teachers to evaluate students and to use those data to help those students learn better. And I thought by putting it down on paper, it would be possible for you to take a closer look at it than just the comments themselves. So I'd like to pass those on to you, Ken.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ma'am? Please.
Laura Slivka. I have a kindergartner, and I have never been to the high school. So I guess some comments that I would make may or may not be relevant, so I'll have to go tour the high school first. But overall, I'd like to see a building that is going to be built to last, and that is able to accommodate fluctuations in population size and potentially suitable for community use.
Sir?
Bert Zupra, Orleans resident and parent of 2 former NASA students. I'm just going to echo what has been mentioned here before from several people. Love to see the school used optimally by all the residents of all 4 towns, not only for school, but for other activities as well.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Tracy Murphy, I'm an Orleans resident. I have 3 kids in the system who will be in the new high school at some point. So I like all the ideas I'm hearing, and I'd also add that I think one of the strengths of the current campus is the outdoor time that the kids get. And so I would love to see new buildings and then campus that continue to promote and assist kids with sort of that, health, both mental and physical health of being inside and outside in spaces that promote wellness.
Thank you.
Karen Sweeney, Orleans resident, parent of 3 children, one which just graduated a couple of years ago, one at the high school, a junior now, and then a middle schooler who might just miss this. He'll be there during the renovations. But as a parent of girls who are there and graduated, I really feel like while they have excelled academically, the arts program at the current high school is so rich and provided for them an amazing sort of counter to the academics that were also excellent. And I just feel like as the arts are so much a part of Cape Cod at all levels and the uniqueness to us. So that's one of the things I think we really need to focus on. It's a way we could also bring the community in, but spaces for the arts program.
Ms. Beal?
Hi, I'm Debbie Beal. I'm a Orleans resident, a prior educator, and a prior member of the Nauset Regional School Committee. And what I really would like to see is in the actual building and construction of the school, that you think about repurposing some of the current materials into the building, and to either make, as you take down the old building and you're doing this renovation, you begin to think, how could we use these materials to make school furniture or new walls in other places, or just different spaces, how to, but also in the construction of the building itself.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Kendall. I'm a parent of 2, soon to be 2 in the elementary school, so I'm excited to kind of hear all this whole process, because I was in high school and my college, and I was walking through construction sites, so I could have, how at least my parents could have had a hand in the decision making. But all my concerns are everybody's talking about, so it's a long road, so glad to be on it.
Thank you. Great. And the red.
Antje Flanders, Orleans resident. I have 2 boys in the elementary school. I second calls for thoughts about energy efficiency, renewable energy at the school. And I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned, I agree with arts community center about athletic opportunities for the students.
Portia Caloro, I have a child at the high school, middle school, and the elementary school. Actually, no, 2 high schoolers. And I agree with almost everything that's been said. I like the idea of having, try to make it a 0 footprint, et cetera. My focus, though, right now is I have a swimmer, and this is too late for him, but they were going to Nantucket for swim practices while their pool was closed. There are 45 kids who
are traveling everywhere. I know that there was, on the original design of the high school, that they had laid out land for a pool. It was just never put in. And I just feel that that is, when I went to school, I grew up here, but I went to a boarding school in Missouri, and we had a swimming requirement to graduate. And here we are on Cape Cod, and I feel as if with what happened with the young man who was trying out for the lifeguard position and so on and so forth, just the understanding of where we are, how to get those kids educated about swimming, panic, anything like that. Having a pool might sound frivolous, because I also am on the side of finance saying, let's try to keep this within a reasonable billion.
It's a heck of a pool.
Anyway, so pool, also the arts, someplace where we can all listen to some good music.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm Melanie Emerald. I am a parent to an Orleans Elementary School 5th grader. And I agree, again, with most everything here, but as Portia just said, a pool is something that I would like to see. My son is a big swimmer, and he needs something as opposed to what we have now.
Thanks, ma'am.
Sharon Basso, parent of a middle schooler. Pretty much agree with everything that's been said so far.
Okay. And Manny.
Samantha Romer, I have an elementary schooler and a middle schooler. And being last, I pretty much agree with everything. I love the aspect of community, bringing the community in and having flexibility and kind of shared spaces where people can collaborate.
Thank you very much.
Is there anyone that we didn't get, or or is there someone that has some burning priority that wasn't shared yet? Yes.
Definitely, I'm a big reader, and I want definitely a large modern library.
A large modern library. Great. Excellent. All right. Thank you. All right.
All right, great. Well, thanks for sharing. These are some of the same ideas that resonated. We have met with the teachers in workshops and interviews about 4 times. And also, we had our 4th student group today, which was actually the architecture class, which was a good class to kind of kick off the morning.
They were very astute.
But
very impressive.
Bringing that back, it was eye-opening, because that class is taught in a hallway. And there are no windows. There's virtually no ventilation space. It's also the same hallway where they teach the health class. So the school has been extremely resourceful in using the footprint they have. The programs have adapted. They're trying to react to it. As the superintendent said, they submitted the SOI. In 2 years, they came to visit, and they said, we're going to take you in, because we know that there's a need here and it has to be addressed. It's not easy to get into this with the MSBA. There are many other towns across the Commonwealth that have the same ailments. But when you have the academic excellence and you're trying to be resourceful in this dated campus, there was a need, and the MSBA clearly saw that, and that's why we're here today. And it's also good to note, as Richard walked us through the schedule, you have to go by their phases, and then it comes to the community. And if it doesn't pass by the 4 communities, you're kind of they give you a chance to explain why, but really you're back to the beginning. There's other towns in the Commonwealth that need the funding, and so what we're here today is to get it right and to hear you, listen to your needs. We listen to the students, the teachers. We want everybody's input. Tell us any programs that you feel are needed for this. And when it comes to the project itself, for the study scope, we're going to look at all options. We're required by the Massachusetts School Building Authority to look at a no-build option, just bringing the existing building up to code. It will not meet state standards academically. The spaces are too small. You have classrooms that are 700 square feet, even smaller. The minimum by the state is 850. 850 to 950 is the minimum for a classroom. You have the new building, end building. Those classrooms average 700 square feet. So again, we have to do an option, that's a no-build option, just to see the baseline for the cost to bring that campus up to code. It'll have new finishes and new exterior envelopes, et cetera. But again, there'll be no educational kind of value meeting today's state standards. Then we're going to look at options that just add some additions to meet those state space standards. We're going to look at a whole slew of renovation options, looking at maybe taking 25% offline and adding addition, that's 25%. Maybe 50% of the existing campus comes off and we add an addition for 50% of the campus. Maybe even going a step bigger where we're only looking at keeping the gymnasium. Again, many options are going to be evaluated, and most importantly, we are required to look at new construction as well. So we're going to look on the campus to see the best location for new construction. So we go from baseline code compliant to new construction. We're going to look at many, many options, probably 20 options. And then we're going to hone in and refine which options meet the criteria that we just heard tonight. And that's the school building committee. You're going to have those discussions, and they're going to evaluate. And again, when we go into the preferred schematic design, there'll be one option that goes to the state, pending their approval. So just to give you an idea, we're looking at everything.
Just curious whether anything completely different from what we've talked about came out of the teacher meetings or the student meetings. I mean, is there anything?
There was a big focus on professional development space, teacher support space, which resonated with everybody. Having
Got brought up here, but you're talking about a louder voice there.
Yeah, so we had about 4 days, we had 2 workshops, and then we had 2 full days of interviews. And that was a theme that came up over the 4 days.
And we're going to share in some detail some of the findings from those workshops, but just sort of what rose to the top. Another thing was the collaboration piece, because a lot of people really like the campus, but they also feel very isolated, both departmentally and also just sort of professionally. And so the idea of having collaboration spaces for students and teachers, and to have some kind of student center, that where there was some kind of hub that felt like there's a there, because everything is kind of perimeter. The center is the courtyard, but that doesn't build the community. That's 4 minutes at a time that kids are going through it. And it's very dear in everyone's heart. Pretty much across the board, people felt like they want to preserve that outdoor circulation, teachers and students alike. So we heard that loud and clear. But spaces to collaborate and having a student center.
And David's going to go through that. I'm going to quickly get through my part to kind of get to the good stuff. So there are state standards, and what you see here to the right is the template. Anybody can download this. The enrollment that's been agreed on is for 905 students. When you populate that into the template, it has a school that's 181,000 gross square feet. Okay? We know that the number is going to be higher than that because this is a default template for a high school, but now it has to be customized for Nauset. And so we're going through the educational program right now. We're understanding spaces that may not appear on the template. We heard, forensics labs, lots of science program, that's important. The robotics, all these items need to be accommodated. And these are programs that you're doing right now that may not be able to fit on that template. So we need to go to the MSBA and have a story of why there's a need to add these additional programs. And so if we do hear ideas about more professional teacher planning spaces, we want to request that with the state. And hopefully they'll look at it, consider it, and put it in for reimbursement. Okay.
Kent, I just want to mention that the 905 is set by the state, and that will stay through the whole project. So whether the population increases from the current 950-ish to 975 or decreases to 925, we will continue to design around the 905.
Great. I'm going to just quickly go through. So we've been on campus really since October, the end of October, evaluating the existing conditions and having the educational visioning. One thing we quickly did was we inventoried all the existing spaces for all the levels of the school, and that's what is going to populate into that space template, because the state wants to see what you have. So if you do kind of make a plea that, hey, we have this now, will you support it? That's what they want to see. And then when we just simply look at the beginning of our educational programming when it comes to space, we talk about space because space equals money. You know, the larger the school, the more expensive it's going to be. When you look at what the MSBA provides, that's in the solid color. So after we evaluated some of your general academic, there's some science labs that probably should be on top that you need to support your program, 3 additional classrooms. So it bumps the core academic, which are general classrooms and science labs and teacher planning, up a bit. Special education, we inventoried around 3,200 square feet of special education. The state provides 10,000. So on your campus, there's dedicated space for around 3,200 square feet. On the template, there's 10,000. So we're going to work with special education and the department to see how that should be distributed and what types of spaces will be in that category. Art and music kind of tracks pretty close. Vocations and technology, you have some really great programs, but it's going to knock a few higher than what you have on the template. So there's the metalworks and jewelry, there's the ceramics, there's the robotics, there's the woodworking. All of that needs to fit into that purple column, and it doesn't right now. So in this educational program that the district is writing, they're going to provide the rationale why the MSBA should support that space. Okay? Media Center tracks pretty close. MSBA gives you slightly larger. Art and Drama, MSBA gives you slightly more. What we do know is that in any option, that a theater for 600 is not going to fit in its existing space, so most likely that is a new construction. Dining is slightly higher. Medical, admin, guidance, custodial, they kind of track pretty close. Just want to show you, because that's the base, you know, that Excel document that had all the spaces, and that just gives you kind of a general idea that you can understand. So just observations that we've had. We have our landscape architect, Stimson Associates. They're a great firm. They're very sensitive to how the building should be integrated with the natural environment. So they're going to be a great part to this team. You have a wonderful collection of campus buildings, small footprint campus buildings. There's some really unique outdoor spaces captured within it. You can see that circulation that they were mapping out is in that kind of red, kind of vein-looking thing circulating. That's the density they were observing students walking through the campus. We have parking. We have a loop road that wraps the campus. You can see how the edges of the building and the landscape are eroded to kind of reflect the original design. And so there are some great things in any renovation addition with that campus that people resonate with and quite enjoy. The students quite enjoy having the meeting spaces that we want to keep in any option. Also, just the way it's organized with zones. There's more community functions highlighted in the blue with the gym, the CAF, the library, and the auditorium, and then more academic functions in that orange color with the outdoor building connector, stitching it all together. And it is a campus, has that collegiate feel, but it's very inward focused. All the existing buildings have limited glass to look out, so you can be in a science lab or in a general classroom and you feel very enclosed. There's one sliver of glass on the side, and even that you can't see out. So for a very open campus, it's very inward focused, not only within a classroom because of lack of visibility and the connection to the outdoors, but the outdoor connection itself. There's no relief out to the distance. You know, it's a building and then a courtyard in the building, which has some nice, vegetation, but again, very inward focused. You can see in those heavy blue lines are where it's open, where people kind of filter in. And so in any option, we want to study how people are coming to campus and how we can control that, but also maintain, the essence of the open campus. Our landscape architects went through really stormwater is in poor kind of condition. You need a much better stormwater management system. There's flooding. There's water that cheats into the gallery of the auditorium that they put sandbags in there at certain times. A lack of lighting. I know there's been some retrofits, but again, walkways need to be brought up to code, and stormwater is a major focus, and just all general campus lighting needs to be improved. Architectural, there's you have had the windows and the roof completed recently, but the exterior envelope has virtually no insulation. There's about 3/4 inch of insulation that's deteriorated. You have the cedar siding, those are woodpeckers that damage that. And actually, those are the added sculptural pieces in a couple of those pieces, maybe to mask the holes, which is great, and it adds to the character. And so the entire exterior envelope of the buildings has to be replaced. The insulation and the cladding, whatever it may be, and if we're being true to this, modernist architecture of the time, the concrete, superstructure may still be there, but we need to bring up its thermal value just to meet building code. So just simply to meet building code, everything has to come up. The furniture, there's some good furniture in classrooms. There's a kind of a mismatch of furniture. There's some more modern, contemporary, and then some bulkier stuff. But furniture is going to go a long way in kind of future-ready, flexibility. So that's going to be a big part of the project. And then just casework and sinks. We would just want to make sure that there's enough working surface. Structure, again, there's good bones. No signs of settlement were observed throughout the area. There's some general cracking, some rebar that's exposed. And then the structural partie itself somewhat lends itself to expansion, but again, there are areas where the superstructure does restrict the size. When we talk about bringing the classrooms up to the 850, it's going to be a challenge, and we're going to look at different options that can be creative and bring it up to the square foot requirements, but work within the structure itself. Mechanical, just in general, has kind of met, it's served the school well. It's time to be replaced. And that really can be carried over for electrical. Here, mechanical, electrical, and telecom is mapped out for the different areas across the campus.
Okay, quick question. Are those oil-fired boilers?
Those are gas.
They're natural gas?
Yep. There's a 250, that's a diesel. The generator?
Yeah.
There's a generator, yep. That's diesel. But this just helps, in general, give you a lay of the land. And why this is important is when we're doing additions and talking about phasing, we don't want to short circuit the system, so we want to be smart in how we plan and work around these different systems. Same thing with electrical. There's some most recent updates for technology, which work quite well, but may not lend itself to expand to the level you need in the future. Fire protection, there is none within the buildings itself. So I started to explain in N building, the newest building, there's an egress door that was required as a second means in the back of the classroom. So you already have a 750 square foot classroom that's small. And then when you make sure that you're maintaining that egress, it makes the classroom even smaller. So it's quite restrictive. But any new or renovated option will be fully sprinkled. That's just code. And just want to point that out. There are hydrants kind of throughout the campus, and the water suppression system that was installed in the front of the school is no longer required for this project because now they're connecting to the main water mains coming in. Plumbing, very inefficient, and many fixtures are not ADA compliant. And that's pretty much it. This is going to be up there. We're working on an existing conditions report that I'm sure will be shared, and you can download that. We're looking to complete that within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Any questions before we move on to educational visioning?
Just one quick one. Is there any consideration to changing the nature of the entryway for the high school?
We're going to let this process kind of influence where we're going to end up. So we're not trying to design it in a vacuum. We want to hear input, but yes, we do think there should be one kind of control. And that doesn't mean you lose the spirit of an open campus either.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on one sec. Sorry, I don't know why we started at the end, but it's going to be easier to go this way. So we do have some fun pictures to share with you. All right, so the visioning process. So as Ken has said, we've had a number of different workshops. This is a process that the MSBA requires for all its jobs. They really want to make sure that people are thinking very deeply about the kind of programs that they want and writing an educational plan that clearly lays out sort of what you do now, what you want to do in the future, what you're most excited about, and what will help to facilitate that in terms of a new building. And so a lot of the language that we're developing here is towards the writing of the educational plan, so that there's a real strong connection between the design alternatives that we come up with and the goals of the school. And so we have different groups that we're working with. We've met with your core and leadership team a number of times, and we have ongoing meetings there just to make sure that we're looking at big picture sort of priorities and goals. We have a design working group. Now, usually in an MSBA process, that's a group of anywhere from, for a high school, between 40 and 65 people that include teachers and administrators. There are also community representatives and community partners, some students. What we decided with the leadership team early on is that we will be holding a workshop, so this is a bit of a plug for this for anyone who are interested. We will be holding a workshop for the community, and we will let you know, whereas Kathleen, we haven't nailed down a date for that, but we will let you know what evening that might happen. But we decided early on with the group that we wanted to include the voices of all the teachers. So to your point, Mr. Sinclair, to really include all the teachers' voices. So we have done these workshops with every teacher at the school, every teacher and administrator. So we did a workshop on January 2nd that had 94 people. And we went through this whole process. I'm going to share with you some of the findings from that. We also met on November 28th with groups of 20 teachers at a time, depending on where their free period was. And we talked about learning goals and best practices. What is it that you're most excited about? What are your learning goals? Now, we have the NOSIT expectations, so we were sort of building from that, but we did a bunch of talking about what do we mean by future-ready skills and 21st century teaching and learning. What is your image of what that might look like, both now and 5 years from now and 20 years from now? We then connected that to design patterns and guiding principles. And I'm going to share a bunch of design patterns with you. We shared about 50 different images of different schools that have been designed and built in the last 5 years. Because the thing is that most of us think about schools, when we think about designing a new school, it's a nicer version of what we already think of as school. And part of what the MSBA wants to make sure of in order to get that adaptability that so many people said we need to be considering is that we're thinking outside of that box. So we know, right, we can already predict what teachers are going to say. I want heat that works. I want air conditioning. I want bathrooms that are nearby. It would be nice to have a sink. I want more natural light. I want good technology. And I want safety. Those all came up, and those are all a given. In any MSBA job, that just sort of, that's part of the core package. We're trying to encourage people to think more sort of aspirationally about what would you love to see in this school? What would really make it support what you do in even better ways? So we talked about design patterns, we shared about 50, and the whole group of 94 people prioritized them, and I'm going to show you how those prioritized, what order they came out in, the top 20. We also created a set of guiding principles. Guiding principles are priorities that we want to make sure really sort of lay out what the big picture priorities are and the non-negotiables about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and what we want to make sure that the building accomplishes, so that from the very beginning we're building that into our thinking process and we're always coming back to those guiding principles, making sure we're staying honest. And then key spaces and adjacencies, because Ken shared with you the MSBA template. They say, okay, you're going to have 905 students, this is how many square feet you get, and they spit out a template. As long as you don't go over the square footage, which translates into dollar costs, you can use that in creative ways, and that's where you really have the creative license, because it's through synergies that we're going to really get this building being more than the sum of its parts. And that's what's really different about how schools of the future are really being designed, because they're more like, and not in an impersonal way, they're more like a modern office environment, a high-performance workplace. You've got classrooms, but that's not the only place where learning is happening. It's happening outside in extended learning areas. And then you have small conference rooms and large conference rooms. And there's a bunch of glass, too, so you can see what's going on. You have places that are noisy, you have places that are quiet, you have places that are really messy. So we want to get all that in the mix and think about sort of those synergies that you can get through adjacencies. So we went through these 2 workshops, and I'm going to share some of the priorities that came up. Now what we did is people worked in small groups of 7 people at a table, basically, and we had 12 of those tables, and we shared all these. People first did an activity about priorities, and they filled them out, and we tabulated them all, and this is the order they came out in terms of how many teachers mentioned them. So right at the top is teacher collaboration spaces. People are feeling really isolated in terms of their sense of community within the school as teachers. Improved technology out there, outdoor connections and spaces. And so these numbers are, that's just the first sort of like a kind of what bubble to the surface. This has come up a lot. People really value the outdoor campus. They feel like we're in this beautiful environment. We should be having all this indoor-outdoor connectivity and really taking full advantage. Performance and performing arts we know is very important to the school. Natural and controllable lighting. People felt like they were really starved for natural light in these buildings, because as beautiful as they are as a pieces of their in and of themselves, as a campus, the experience of being inside them is not always that nice. From what we learned from the teachers and the students, it feels dark, it feels cold, and it feels kind of brutal. That word came up a few times. Flexible classrooms, we want to be thinking about agility in our classrooms. We'll talk about what that looks like. Fitness and health, not just in the athletic realm, but just thinking about the whole wellness and how do we do wellness within the school. Maintaining thoughtful and open campus design, improved science lab spaces, and student collaboration spaces. I'm not going to go through all of these now. So we have basically, from this workshop, we have a 30-page report. From the first set of interviews, we have a 30-page report. And those are going to be available, I was told, on the school website, right? So you can look through them at length. But many of the things that we named here, that you named as priorities, came up. So there's definitely a lot of alignment in people's thinking. Visual arts, the arts are very important to the school, and it's one of the things that people really feel makes it special. We want to make sure that those are celebrated. Multi-purpose spaces, sustainability, the idea of sustainability, and the idea that sustainability is connected to building as teacher. Kids and teachers are interacting with the systems in the building, and they're learning about sustainability through that process. Certainly the library came up as people's favorite space a lot of times within the conversations, and there's a lot about it that's real nice, but we want to find more places that are like that, where you can sit and be quiet, where you can also be with a group, where you can experience natural light, and where you can feel like you're in a more open environment. And then departmental offices, those have been lost over the years through just trying to take space for things that you need, but it really cuts into that collaboration piece. And then sort of centrally located services. And community access. Community access came up a lot, and you'll see it's one of our guiding principles. So that's something we know, and that's pretty much what the MSBA is always supporting. They want to see this, use this, if not 24/7, before school, after school, on weekends. So we need to define sort of public realms and more private realms, places where the public can access on a regular basis and use as a resource, but not necessarily go into the more private realms of the school. So those are some of the priorities. I did want to also mention, we then talked about learning goals and best practices. So we know we have the NOSIT expects, the academic excellence, civic responsibility, and social awareness. We kind of primed the pumps by just looking at lots of examples of what schools around the country are thinking about when they think about future-ready skills. We did an activity in small groups again, and this is what sort of how it all came out in terms of the skills that the teachers felt were most important for kids to be college and career ready in this day and age. And communication came right up at the top. Leadership was also a very strong one. Now, what you see highlighted in orange, communication, creative thinking, or critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. I highlighted those because those all came up in the top of people's thinking, and those are all what we call the 4 C's. So the Partnership for 21st Century Skills coined the 4 C's at the turn of this last century. They're baked into Next Gen MCAS, they're baked into Next Gen Science Standards. They're the kind of skills, the higher order thinking skills, that we keep coming back to as being very important to emphasize. Emotional intelligence and lifelong learning. There was a lot of discussion about really getting kids passionate about what they were doing, confident about themselves as learners, and connecting their learning to life skills. So I'm not gonna dwell on these again. You can look at them in the notes. Real world application and life skills were a big part of the conversation. STEM literacy, lots of schools are thinking about STEM. Now we're going to get to the design patterns. So these are the design patterns that we shared, and I'm going to go through the ones that came up in priority order. So again, we did a voting. Each group basically came up with their list of their top 10 design patterns, and then when we compiled them all, these are the ones that came up in priority order. Safety and security came up number 1, which is actually was really surprising to me because we do this a lot, and it almost comes up as the first thing that people say, but people do not talk a lot about safety and security right off the bat at Nauset. There's a feeling that people do feel safe. The kids feel safe and the teachers feel safe, and they like the openness of the environment. And yet, it is on people's mind. How do we create a campus that still has this openness, but that feels like there are more kind of like there's a gateway that you go through to get in, and we're really clear about who's on campus and when they're coming on campus. Agile classrooms. When we talk about agile classrooms, it's not like a lot of bells and whistles. We do need robust technology, and more than anything else, that's what's going to enable every square inch of whatever buildings we create to be used as a teaching learning space. But agile classrooms, the pieces of that are flexible furniture, chairs that can be stacked, tables that can be arranged to do project-based or individual learning or more traditional delivery, places for storage, storing materials. So in this image you see right there, those are sliding whiteboards, and behind it are just shelves where you can put lots of materials, and then you can close the door so it doesn't look messy. Here's a movable wall that's whiteboards in between 2 classrooms. All of a sudden, instead of 900 square feet, you got 1,800 square feet. Yes?
I saw in a school in Connecticut where the technology was all dropped down from the ceiling, all the screen technology,
Yes.
computer screens and everything, no wires in the room.
No wire, right,
Yeah.
right.
And I thought that was
Yes.
interesting.
Technology is something we know is going to continue to evolve, and we know that it's going to get more and more virtual, actually, virtual and interactive. And technology is going to be a lot about production, not just consumption. So 3D printers, laser cutters, large format color printers allow kids to produce really professional work at very young ages. So there's a lot that we can be excited about there. We're not going to order the technology for this school until 6 months before it's built because it keeps changing, right? So, but we need to have a robust infrastructure. Other components, just good natural light. And the light that isn't natural is diffused throughout the room. So it really has a very pleasant place to learn. Here's some more examples of natural light. These are all MSBA jobs. Oh, actually, the one on the right, Cambridge did on its own. But it's similar to many MSBA jobs. This is a light shelf that reflects light off the ceiling, so then it gets diffused throughout the classroom. And then, of course, the lights are on automatic timers, and so very rarely do those lights actually switch on if it's a fairly bright day outside. Learning commons, so that's another thing. These are the priorities in order of how the group saw them. This is a learning common. This is a renovation of a building. This used to be an outdoor courtyard that was between 2 buildings, and now it's an infill, and it creates a campus center with cafeteria and as well as a learning commons with flexible furniture, quiet and noisy areas, and it's a place where the whole community can come together. Welcoming arrival, a sense of when you arrive that there's a process that you go through, you know where to arrive, you know how to get in, there might be some nice places for seating. collaborative spaces, those could be conference room. Now, Kent was mentioning the square footage, that we have about 7,000 more square feet of special ed space that we're going to be able to diffuse throughout your building, and we have to spread it around. DESE is going to be looking to make sure that, because the approach to special education is what we call push in as opposed to pull out. We used to pull out kids that were getting services and take them to one end of the building, and kids understandably did not like that experience. Now we have aides, oftentimes that are in the classrooms, that are working with not just a few kids, but all the kids. And then they can take a kid out to a room right adjoining it, so a breakout space. So those collaborative spaces could take the form of breakout rooms that are between classrooms, or conference rooms that are part of a neighborhood of classrooms, and they can be used in really flexible ways. So this is the idea of a classroom neighborhood, and what I was talking about in terms of synergy. This is the West Bridgewater Middle High School. And so here in the hallway, we just bumped out the hallway in that one area, if you will. This is what we call a double-loaded corridor, and we took one of the teeth out, right? And what you get then is the ability for all these classrooms to relate to that space. Here's a teacher planning area that has windows that look out onto this, so you get informal collaboration. That's another thing that we want to really build, is the opportunity for students to develop independence and agency, right? Because that's part of those higher order thinking skills. And we notice a lot of that already at Nauset, and I think it's partly because of the open campus. But your kids are operating in some pretty mature ways compared to a lot of the high schools we visit. So this is a situation where all of a sudden then this becomes a neighborhood with with a kit of parts. And there's meeting rooms and smaller places and larger places. Indoor-outdoor connections, here's some examples where we've got garage doors that open right out onto exterior platforms. Here's a makerspace at Winthrop Middle High School. Here's a fitness area. Dining and community. So we talked a lot about big ticket spaces like your media center and your dining area being able to be used all day. Now, the dining area at Nauset is one of the places that kids like the least. It's very noisy and just, lots of stuff going on. Kids really like the distributed dining that they can do right outside the library or in the new area in the hallway outside the cafeteria. We're going to be looking at how can we distribute dining in some different areas or create a new dining experience where you can have different zones within it, so it doesn't feel like one big noisy place, and it can be used all day, because it's really the study center. So that might be where we also look to create that kind of student center that everybody's been saying they would love to have. And that relates to the kind of furniture we have. We want flexible furniture. We want different kinds of seating areas. This is a school in Manhattan, Innovate Manhattan, and you can see it kind of looks like a college student center, right? Where there's places where kids can use their technology. It's a comfortable place to be throughout the day. Controlled visibility. Building in transparency so that there are connections between spaces. And when you have things like a makerspace, which this is, you can showcase that. And so it's exciting. You can see what's going on. One of the things that we heard is that all that great art stuff that's going on, and you would never know it if you didn't go to that particular building or know where that area was, right? Because it's hidden away from everything. So we want people who wanted art, that's another pattern we'll get to, but art displayed throughout and display and exhibition. But here we just pop in some windows into a meeting area, into a classroom. If you want, and oftentimes there are blinds that you can pull down when you want the privacy, but otherwise it connects, helps you connect people. Outdoor gathering spaces. As a lot of people love the idea of having some kind of amphitheater within the campus, as well as places that were just enjoyable to sit. Quiet spaces, these breakout rooms, places where you could close a door. Some of them you might not need to close a door. This is in a library, right? And having an alcove, places where kids love to hide in plain sight, just like kind of be there and you can see them, but they feel like they're being alone and they can get into their technology or their conversations. Community access we talked about. This is back at West Bridgewater, and you can see that the gym, the cafeteria, the auditorium, and in this case, they actually have local cable access TV, sort of like you do, and music, is all accessible along this main area after hours and on weekends. And you can close these doors and lock off the academic area of the school. So it really is sort of a community area in and of itself. Maker spaces, where lots of schools are thinking about how do we get kind of spaces where kids can do hands-on stuff, might, in this case, connected to robotics or design thinking. Varied performance venues, as Kev was talking about, Black Box Theater came up a lot, and the need to have a theater, a venue that your kids could really use so they don't have to go to the middle school to do their performances. Professional work areas for teachers where they can collaborate. And there was a thought that some of those should be departmentally. Each department should have their own smaller professional work area, but then there would be one more centrally located where everybody could come together and do collaborative work. And we've talked a lot about also the ways professional development happen within the school. Here are some examples of breakout spaces. These are all high schools, and this is where they do look a little more corporate, but these are the kind of spaces that they can be right next to a classroom. Kids can get up, they can work in small groups, or they can have a smaller seminar. Gives them a change of venue. Building as teacher. Here's an example of this back at a school in Cambridge, MLK, where you can actually see inside the walls here. It's labeled. And then the mechanical room, it shows you all the different machines that are in there. You can have touchscreen panels that show you all the energy usage minute by minute. Kids can interact with that. A recycling program, that definitely came up a lot in our conversations. Universal design and access, so this connects to delivery of special ed and push-in, but it goes beyond that. It's not just ADA accessibility. It's through color and materials and ease of use, making the whole space, or as much as you can, accessible to people of all differing ability levels. Wayfinding and streetscapes. I'm getting close to the end here. I know this is a lot. Here's a school where all this natural light, that you're going down a hallway, but it doesn't feel like a hallway. And there's kind of like different places that you can recognize. It doesn't look like one. You go through so many schools. You don't have hallways in your campus, but most of the schools we go to, there's just hallway after hallway. It's like The Shining. And so how do you create some variety of color, of texture, of place, different nodes? And that has a lot to do with natural light as well. Learning Commons as media center. We were talking about having a great library, right? So here's some examples of libraries where you still have your book collections, but you also have things like breakout rooms, maybe a maker space, sort of a more areas where kids can use their technology, comfortable places to work independently and in groups. And then around the perimeter, you may have places where you can have smaller meetings. Display and exhibition, lots of venues for professional display. Outdoor learning classrooms came up. And also using the campus as being able to navigate around the campus and really sort of take advantage of the nature, the natural beauty. So that's a lot of design patterns. These are all the ones that were prioritized. We'll be putting them into the mix as we think about planning going forward. And the last thing I wanted to share was this guiding principles. So I said we created as a group 7 different guiding principles that are going to lead the design effort. And I'm going to call these guiding principles 1.0 because we made them on January 2nd and I tabulated them and I haven't shared them with teachers yet. So we need to get feedback on them. But this is where it came out. First one was a place where you want to be. A place that really feels like everybody is welcome. It's really inclusive. It's warm. People feel like the school is a place where people want to be, but the building is not warm and inviting. And people, I think, are sort of longing for that. Mastery-based learning, That's why we're all there, right? We want to make sure that we're delivering the goods, but connected to that is transdisciplinary instruction, opportunities for project-based learning, and real-world and practical application. Community connections, making it a community resource, promoting civic engagement, creating secure community access, and connecting also the community of the school along the different departments. Integration and collaboration, so ways that connected learning neighborhoods. People really like the idea of departmentally organized learning neighborhoods, but also other places where the school community can come together. Adaptability and flexibility, we're always thinking about that. How do we create environments that we can evolve over time? Because we may have one idea now, and 10 years from now, it could be quite different. Outdoor connections, how do we build in those in really natural ways? And sustainability, green and eco-friendly, use of natural resources, building as teacher, all right? So that's where we've come so far in these 2 very full days of meetings that we've had. We also had people, and you'll see, if you go to look at the report, there's also about 20 pages of diagrams. We had teachers diagram their ideas as well and tell us what they would like to see in terms of adjacency. So we're really trying to make this very palpable for people so they can imagine themselves being in these spaces. So with that, we have another half hour, and maybe we should open up for Q&A and then do something about blue skies. Is that what you were?
Yeah, let's take some questions, but we
Yeah.
want to hit the blue sky, because.
Yeah, let's open up for a little bit for any questions, and then we have an activity called Blue Sky Ideas that we want to do with folks.
Before we get into that, give you a chance to put your questions together, just a couple follow-up things. This is just your first shot at this, folks. I'm expecting to hear more from you, as we will all the groups. I mean, if the building committee meets every Wednesday for 12 months a year, and we spend an hour and a half for each week, then the citizens who we represent should at least give us, half of that time giving us ideas and feedback, please. As you leave this room tonight, talk with other friends. I'm sure it's going to start stimulating things along what David just brought up, or Kent, and please jot them down. And if you go to the website, I believe there's a link just to get us some information so we can follow up on it. Because this process is something I've been looking forward to. I shared with Joe from Daedalus when I did the last project in 94, 95. We hired the architect on December of 94. He came on board of January 95. 3 months later, I'm in front of town meeting in Wellfleet presenting a design and plans. Because we had to build a school ASAP because we had 8 portable classrooms and there were more kids coming down the pike. I don't want to do that again. This process is going to be deliberative, and it's going to be inclusive, and you folks will know what's coming down the pike and will not be surprised. Mr. Elsasser has had great new principal at the high school. He and I and Tom have been up to Boston twice. I spent a lot of time in the car chatting about where we're headed with this and what we'd like to see, because it was our job to represent you in front of the MSBA board and the architectural board and sell them what we would like to do and what we think Nauset is, why Nauset is so special. We had, as mentioned, architectural firms give us proposals. All their proposals towards the end of the catalog gave us their solutions to what they thought our problems were. They thought our problems were the buildings were not connected and kids had to walk outside between classrooms. That was abhorrent to them. Mr. Conrad answered the question great. Somebody said, what happens when the kids are walking outside and then it rains? Tom basically said, they walk faster. We want the kids outside the buildings. And the other part of the thing, we explained to folks how Nauset works. Nauset has block scheduling, which means the kids only change classrooms 4 times a day. There's only 4 minutes between classes, so they're not outside a lot. But we wanted that connectivity to what is existing and what is special about Nauset. When we told them that some days you could hear the waves crashing. If you're there in the evening, you could see the beam from the lighthouse scanning over the campus. Those types of things intrigue folks in Boston. After the meetings, they said, can we come and visit? I said, sure. You give us a date, we'll walk you around the campus. It's long in the tooth, as I said, we know that. But it's still a very special place for a lot of reasons. Mostly the students, the kids, and the members of the 4 communities that support it. I will share with you one more thing. The reason Nauset was so quick to be accepted by MSBA is that 12 years ago, Nauset Regional School District and its citizens put together a special maintenance program. It's the only place in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that the citizens say, we will give you outside your operating budget some money to help maintain the properties. That was impressive to them. It's impressive to everybody when I tell it to them, but it's the only place that does that. So that there's some money aside that you don't have to choose between a teacher, an aide, and painting the building or fixing a doorway. We have some of those funds available to do those types of projects. So hats off to the voters of the region. Thank you.
I'm really impressed with your pictures. They're really stunning, and I love the spaces that you showed. I'm interested too, are you using any recyclable materials in this building project? Are you doing any kind of duplication of uses of space? For instance, a roof top could also become a garden,
Yeah.
could also become a gray water collection thing.
Right.
Could also become a classroom that's right there, but kind of outdoors. I'm just wondering if you've considered those
Well,
kinds.
the idea of a rooftop garden came up a number of times, and particularly as connected to science programming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're challenging everybody to say, yes, here's a classroom, but what else can you do with it?
Yeah.
You know, who do you need to be next to make something, unique happen to improve your program? So yeah, we're challenging everybody to look at the space, to get as flexible as possible. And then, yeah, as far as sustainability, we're gonna get into that, but we met with the green team, a student group, and they were great. And so there were some, challenges, everybody here. Can this be net zero? Is it living building? Challenge. So there are kind of a high degree of sustainability. Our firm has completed many sustainable buildings, living building challenges, and we're pretty proud of our history with achieving LEED and other milestone groups. So.
That's wonderful.
Other questions, please? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it might be more comment than question, but it might be more for administration than for you guys. But when you were talking about those 4 Cs, and I've been thinking a lot about the last few years around kind of this it's not Nauset School, but school's role in some of the creation and generation of the stress and anxiety in our students nowadays. And I've been thinking a lot about longer days to do less, and I guess my question might be more for admin around before we jump in and design a space, have we simultaneously, has there been any conversation around, well, what if this is a building where kids are there from 7 till 7, where it is actually healthier for a kid to roll in, have some school day, maybe some athletics, maybe a light dinner, be around people rather than screens back at their homes when they travel across all of Cape Cod and kind of close their bedroom door and hop on their phone. And when I look at a lot of those 4 Cs, a lot of that you need to have people around and contact with each other. And when we compress that still into that kind of traditional 6-hour school day, I think a lot of the opportunity is lost. So I guess it is more for admin, and if we want to build not just rooms that are adaptable, but a campus that really might be adaptable to a longer school day, a longer school year, a kind of a different vision of traditional public school education.
And I think that's why we're hearing, even from the students, not the library space, but separate, that student union.
Yeah.
Where a space where they all can come together and be able to work on projects, but also be in the middle of an art gallery. So I think the students themselves were saying, we don't have a space right now where we can all come together, but that would support, the before or after. So we've had some on the design side conversation.
Well, and a lot of what, as you're right, a lot of those 4 Cs relate to social emotional intelligence and learning. And I definitely have felt from talking to teachers, that there is a real emphasis on that, or a concern about it, and a concern about kids' stress level. I think the whole, the embracing of the art program and the richness of it. You have art offerings that most high schools don't have, and there's a huge emphasis on that. But also the athletic program. And the performing arts, the theater. I think people see those as really integral to the experience of students of the school. Now, do you want to respond, Chris, about that?
Chris, I'm the principal. And we're not waiting for the building to show up to solve our problems. It'd be fantastic when it does. Have a conversation about time, about community. How can, if you look at all of those slides, we've really been talking about teaching and learning, not necessarily about the building, because we think if we get the teaching and learning articulated clearly enough, the design decisions about the building will come. So when should school start? When should it end? Should there be different pathways for different students? How do we organize time during the day? Where is the stress level coming from? Everything from scheduling to time to relationships to then what the classroom space looks like. So it's an ongoing dialogue at the high school to always try and get things to be better. The building is just going to be helpful because that's not something we can really change. As you've heard a little bit, we're Cape Codders, right? So we're resilient, we're self-reliant. We're figuring out how to make it work. So when these new designs come, it's going to let us take our understanding of time and education, and it's just going to it's going to be able to realize its potential. Now we can only go so far because there are brick and mortar limitations on us that would bust out.
Thank you, Jason.
Just a quick suggestion. I think we've got in your project at this stage, along with Cape Tech that just broke ground, a really unique opportunity for you guys not to make any mistakes. I mean, really, you can actually say to them, we're thinking about this type of space, because they've really, if you had gone through their, feasibility design, they did similar as they required to do as you did. But they're pushing the envelope in some different uses of space with hopefully the goal that there'll be cross-pollination between the core curriculum and the shop and the trades, but it might be good to visit with them periodically to make sure you learn from any of what they're doing, to make sure what they thought of as they're building it really holds true.
Yes, sir.
I was just going to piggyback on what the gentleman said about the use of time. I wonder if there's been any discussion among the professional staff to maybe have flexible hours, where certain teachers report at 1 hour of the day, and other teachers come in later and stay later to accommodate the needs of the kids. Some kids like to work at the high school. Some kids would have schedules where they would like to be on campus rather than be at home alone, even if they're not in class. But to have people available, where professional staff available for all hours of the day.
And I think it's fair to say that we're a place where we're not interested in maintaining the status quo or necessarily doing things how they've been done, but more asking questions of how could it be done differently. And that's based on feedback from the students, observations that we have, so that we're not stuck in just kind of running the trains on time and doing it as the event, but asking the question, how could it be done differently? How could it be done better? And I think that's important for the kids to know that they're surrounded by adults who are always asking, so what if we looked at this, what if we looked at it? And be smart about it. There can be a lot of unintended consequences from big ideas. But I graduated from the school in '82 and spent 30 some odd years doing education all over the country and came home to be the principal. And it's a place where people ask big questions, big ideas, and want to figure out, okay, how are we going to get that done? This is an amazing opportunity to wonder what education is going to look like in 50 years. I mean, that's what's in front of us. What's it going to look like in 50 years? Can we, in the next 5 years, build something that 45 years from now, people are being like, wow, they saw way ahead of where things were. That's the opportunity.
And to get to your point, so about visiting with Cape Cod Tech, we spent, 3 of us from the building committee, myself, Chris, and Mr. Wade from East End, we spent the day with Kent and Richard going through a tour of other buildings that have come online. We went to Situate High School, we went to Holbrook, and we went to Plymouth South. All of them had new buildings that fitted the needs that they wanted, they brought forward. And what I picked up on was that at one school, their library was about the size of that trophy case, and it was on wheels, because their whole thought process about libraries was electronic. Another school, there was a couple of cases, and they were moved around to different parts of the building, so their thought of a library was totally different. Plymouth South had the traditional library. The stacks were there, but they're much smaller. And quite frankly, when we did the project 20 years ago, the library stacks got smaller because books were, nobody was sure how many books were going to be used, so it became more electronic media center. So we have been looking at that, and there'll be other excursions, field trips planned for us to look at that. And so we don't make the mistakes. We try not to make the mistakes. As I pointed out, we were in Boston. The project we did 20 years ago solved a few things, but it created problems. And part of the problems it created was the loop road wasn't always there. So then the campus became isolated as a little island from the ball fields and the front entrance. So, it's like you're in the middle of nowhere surrounded by asphalt. And I really hope we can fix that. That's one of my pushes, as the guys have heard many times. Tom, please.
So Kevin, to your point, Bob Simlin is the superintendent at Tech, of course, he's an excellent, great guy. We see the sciences as where we could easily become partners in terms of the work we're doing. Example would be the autonomous car. And studying together, some of our kids working on its application to tech school and building on that, so we don't have to duplicate sometimes having the same things that we want to share. So that's a big point, and our most recent contract allows us to begin looking at flex time relative to either the beginning of our school day or going later into the afternoon. And I think the other point I'd like to make is that it was interesting to hear the points of how we bring our students together. I'm also concerned about how we bring our adults together. Having lived here for 25 years and seeing drastic changes in our population and so forth. And often, Chris and I hear of communities, we want to build a community center and we want to build this to bring people together. I think this is a great opportunity to look at that approach in terms of where we go. Having conversations with Bob Sinclair and over this period, we know that one thing that everyone has to continually do in their life is continually learn. And this could be the opportunity to take full advantage of that so that all of our citizens have the ability to take advantage of learning at some level in this facility. So we're excited by the possibilities.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Last idea. A lot of conversation about a pool. What if the pool were available to the community, stationed so that it's outside of the school zone, but yet available to the community at large after hours or before hours, whatever the hours are? But that might make it more generally appealing to the community to fund it if they have access to it.
The pool at Nauset High School has a very long history. In working with the team to get as much documentation as possible, we found the documents from 1969, when the original school was designed. There's a pool on the property and that design. The communities couldn't afford it then. It was on the radar on my project 20 years ago, but I had $10.5 million to do everything we did, and the pool was over half of that cost, so we couldn't afford it then either. And quite frankly, there's no water service available to fill it, because the school had a well, but it didn't have municipal water. The pool is on the agenda again, as a matter of fact, at our last meeting. The minimum we are going to do, the minimum we're going to do is actually fix a site on the campus that if a pool is built now or later, it doesn't interfere with the flow and everything we're going to develop right now. We will at least have all the infrastructure hubs. So if we want to build it, there's a gas line, there's an electric line, there's a sewer line, anything that's needed to service a building for a pool will actually be part of the project. It's cheap money to do right now. So at least that is going to happen. How we fund it, MSBA does do no help with paying for a pool. So it's on the community itself, and that's a discussion we'll have moving forward, absolutely. But at minimum, we should, as citizens and as a building committee, at least provide certain amenities or certain connections for it. Yes?
I appreciate your attention to the history of the pool. I'm wondering if you have yet gained access to the recent study that was done by 2 students about the perceptions of students, teachers, and parents toward the advantages and disadvantages of the pool. Have you seen that study?
It's sitting on my desk at the office.
Good.
So one of these days, I'll crack it open and read it.
Yeah. Well, maybe it would be good to do it tomorrow.
I do have the life to live. Yes, Ms. Beal.
Now, I was thinking also about the fact that I'm not sure if the swim team presently rents a pool and what those costs are, and if the town also paid for pool entry fees? I mean, if you could make it more feasible and by considering those aspects of the pool? I mean, I don't, if they are renting, it's probably costly for the people.
In the last few months, if there's one question that's asked of me in the community, it's the pool. And so I can tell you, and Greg really outlines the sort of work we're going to do as a committee. And I'm anxious, we realize the financial cost of such a facility, but there has been some active groups who have been interested in fundraising going forward relative to the possibility of this happening. And I'm going to be seeking out some of those people, see if we can get a group of people together to at least look at, do they still have the same enthusiasm for this going forward, so that we could share that information along with the report that Bob alludes to for all of the committee to consider. So we want to make sure that we turn over every stone there is possible on many, many issues, because we aren't coming back to this for a long, long time, and we've got to get it right this time.
Thank you.
Yes, Chris.
Just one other point on the tech school. We have Harry Turkanian, who was the town administrator from Wellfleet, served on that building committee, on our building committee. So we at least have some.
Yeah. Some connections. Any other questions?
All right. Well, we definitely want to get you out by 8 o'clock. And we also want to take advantage of having you here and getting your best thinking. So we have an activity, Blue Sky Ideas activity. There's more paper on your tables. So for those of you that would like to do this, we'd love for you to participate. Just when we think about Blue Sky Ideas, knowing what you know about the community, knowing what you know about the school, the students there, the teachers there, what would you love to do? We'd like you to write about one idea, or it could be different ideas or qualities or features of the school that you would love to see, that you think would really make the program there, really support it, make it come alive. So, so it's really aspirational. It's not just about, we need enough classrooms to make sure that we're meeting all the needs of the, the students, but what would you love to see there? So if you need a pen, we've got more pen or pencils. Please write clearly, because we will collect them. I'm just going to say take about 5 to 7 minutes to do some thinking about this, and then we'll share a few of them before we leave. All right, any questions about that? All right, so, and if you're thinking about a space, try and be as specific as possible in terms of like, what kind of light is there, what color, what kind of furniture, who's using it, what do you really imagine in your mind's eye? Are you going to be sharing those with us, or are those your notes?
Oh, I'm going to share with you.
Okay, good.
Aquaculture.
What?
Aquaculture. That's what my kids growing oysters.
Think alike. Geodetic dome.
Nice, dude.
All right, we'll take about 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, contract. Right, that's. What's that?
1950s, baby. Oh. Just bring in a little trough from that way.
A bunch of turtles.
Yeah, we got turtles.
Okay, so let's, before we leave, let's just take a few minutes to hear maybe some ideas that people have. Who would like to share a blue sky idea? Yes.
So I have another disguise. I'm from Mindanao and I'm the chairman of the finance committee, but I'm also on the board of the Cape Cod Symphony. And so, full disclosure. So one thought with regard to the auditorium idea is to make sure that, in thinking about it, that it's a very flexible performance space that could be for theater arts as well as music arts, with lots of flexibility to expand, contract for different types of theater, different types of music, different types of stages for theater, different sizes of space and so on, good acoustics, but practice space as well. And also give some thought, and this would be really kind of scary how to do this, is conceivably it could be built collaboratively with other types of arts organizations for education and performance. And if it were built in such a way that it's part of that building where the hall is here and it's over there and it's not part of the classrooms, so even in the daytime it could be used for pre-kindergarten, preschool, and the little kids are there dancing around in their little tutus and the whole thing, and being used like all the time during the day. And because there are not necessarily organizations this far out on the Cape that deliver that type of education. The Symphony and Conservatory provides music education for Parkinson's patients, and they come to the conservatory in West Barnstable. But I don't know if there's that kind of thing out here, unless in perhaps in some of the senior centers. So I'm just saying, collaboration for this type of thing.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Do we have an idea back there?
Yeah, I once again, I'm very much into green energy sources, wind, solar, and water. But I want the students to learn to maintain and keep it up as part of a science curriculum focusing on clean energy engineering, because I want them, I think that in the future, we at least have to reduce our carbon footprint, if not completely erase it. And that I'd like them to learn how to get that kind of engineering under their belt as much as possible in the high school years. That will really put them ahead in college.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yes.
Just a quick one, and it's almost goes counter to what you guys are trying to do, but don't design everything and feel it's complete. And in other words, provide the ability for future students and teachers to make the place their own. In other words, provide a space for a greenhouse, provide space for constructing native gardens. Don't have to design it all. I mean, just allow that experience to grow, because those in fact feed trades, but you want to let them do it. You don't want to have the project vendor do it.
Great. Yes.
Recognize that the high school is only a little more than half of the students that we have, and that the other building, the middle school, is actually older. arguably in greater need. And if you were to combine the two populations, the number of local four-town students you get could actually reach the 1,000 that you're contemplating. So it would be a way to allow the benefit of a new school to be more relevant for a greater number of local students. It would also address some of the issue that some people have about the idea of building a school for students for other towns.
Okay. All right. I want to get this clear. Recognize that high school is only half the population are from these four towns. Or
Middle
half the
school.
student population.
We have another school too.
Yeah.
That's older.
Okay.
Plus 4 additional schools.
They're in the
additional
district.
schools.
They're not part of the region.
All right. Thank you.
But they're still all our
Yes.
kids.
So have the community participate in some aspect of the building or the outside landscaping. So for example, in Cody, Nebraska, it's a really small population of about 200. They got together and they built a straw bale store, and then each student works in the store. And I know that we couldn't do that here with 905 students, nor do we need another store, but having the town cooperatively build a certain portion of, or a space would be something that to get the community, help them own it. And I'd like to see lots of natural light and building materials instead of all plastic products.
I had a few blue sky ideas, and then I wrote something on the bottom cut that I labeled a crazy idea, which was to repurpose an old building as affordable housing for teachers. Just knowing that what a starting teacher gets paid and the prohibitively costly housing on the Cape, especially out in the Outer Cape, that we may have a beautiful school and no one to work in it if we don't.
So faculty housing.
That's not a crazy idea.
All right. Or exchange students, or.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Just mine isn't, when I was trying to think of my blue sky idea, and, you know, when you're thinking about a new school in the future and the technology, it's very easy to get lost in the lights and the screens and all that comes in it, and it's just, for me, with a little, you know, a third grader that has, you know, severe anxiety, I think about making sure that we take care of our kids and that we are not building this fortress of the best technology. And I understand that that is the world we're living in and we're going in. It's just making sure that that's not every child. Every child isn't gonna wanna be, whether it is what it is or not. It's just recognizing that the dynamics aren't the same for every child, and recognizing that the population isn't all the same.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a blue sky question to all of you. You have just started an outreach program outside of the school department. You showed us, you spent a lot of time with teachers and students. Now you're coming out in the community, and you've had a tremendous amount of outreach with letters and communication to get people to come. Tonight, you had less than 1% of the voting population of the town of Orleans. How are you going to take this to those people so that they know that they're going to invest in a great school system? I don't have the idea, but put it on your list. How are you going to do it? Make it happen.
Yeah, I want to talk about that for 1 second. First of all, here's the website, so that's one of the ways we're going to do it. We are already working with Lower Cape TV on, and I think Mr. Conrad, you've already done a couple of focus television programs. You guys, though, are the ambassadors. This should not be a top-down, we tell you what we're doing. Your selectmen, your school committee people, your regional school committee, your former school committee, your grandfathers, your parents. You guys need to be the ambassadors and tell the story. We'll put up there, and this website, by law, cannot be overly one of advocacy. We try just to put up the documents. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. This isn't Amazon. This isn't one-click shopping. So you'll have to work your way through it. The people will have to work their way through it. But we will put as much information out there as we can. We're happy to answer questions as long as you want. So, but you guys really need to be ambassadors for the project and say, this is what we're doing, tell me what you want to do. And there is a way, by the way, if you don't see something on the website, there's an email address, you can just email. This is a community process, so we're happy to add more information. So be ambassadors for the project.
That's a great point, really. And we've identified, Chris and I have identified 75 groups for the district that we're reaching out to now to offer our opportunity to come and speak with them and listen and gather information. And the other piece of it is that Chris has agreed that we're going to have tours, and that's really tough because of the time commitment and when people are available. We're going to set a day. Fridays are looking like it's a possibility. And on the hour, we'll offer tours from a couple of weeks out from now until we get down to the voting, that people can call up, make a slot, and show them the facility. And then we have other ideas, short of going door to door, although I'm not so sure there is some value in that if that could ever be pulled off. Because I think you have some goals.
House calls.
Yeah, house calls, the whole piece. I mean, we want this to be obviously an excellent facility for students who go to high school, but maybe well beyond that as well for our communities. And so that's, I think it's a great point, and it's a starting point, but this certainly this isn't a box to check off like now we're done and all in.
So just, and you all know, everybody in this room knows, we have a community that is highly educated. But a highly educated community, the majority of which, the vast majority of which, don't have any children in the school system. And you look at the percentage of school budgets in other communities, this is significantly different. Now, you've got people who understand the value of education because many of them came here retired with a lot of education. So there's a certain kind of sales pitch that you have to have here that you wouldn't have in the normal greater Boston community. And I think you need to really think about that.
But I will tell you, in Belmont, we talked about $295 million. 75% of the people at the ballot voted for that project, and they have 16% of those people have kids in the schools. Don't be pessimistic. This thing can go.
I know Belmont, my 3 kids went through that high school, and I remember the day it was built, because the other high school burned down.
88% of the people voted to raise their taxes for their school project. The tides have changed, and people are really supporting the project.
So we have an opportunity coming up for this to be in front of the voters sooner rather than later. The Finance Committee has invited Tom and his colleagues to come to a Finance Committee meeting on the 7th of February for just an open forum, basically, to talk about what the cost drivers are and the challenges are to running the school system. And obviously, this is an opportunity to be on that topic. And it's a public meeting. It will be televised. It will be, you can watch it from home, come to the meeting, ask questions about anything and everything about running the school system. But again, it's an opportunity for conversation.
I just have a question sort of related to this, in that if some of these ideas around it moving, having a lot of community space or community, like the pool or something like that, and those things might not be funded, through the state, it would be really good if we could be clear in the communication about what additional costs or what the trade-offs are, so that for the community members, we might say, yes, the extra $1 million to get the pool that is going to be open to the community is something we also really want, even though that's the piece that's not going to be funded by the state or offset by the state. Does that make sense? So I think that kind of...
It'll be very clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's also fair to say that as those of us who are in the school, we value having the community at the school as well. I've always thought that the best learning environment is, babies all the way through, and people all mixed up. As soon as you put people in one group or another, you isolate them, you lose a lot of opportunities for conversation. So the more people who are with our kids on a regular basis, the richer experience they're having. Think of the kid who goes to school in New York City and walks into the school building and then walks back out into people everywhere. That's one of the things that we don't necessarily have. So the more interaction the high school kids can have with younger kids and with older people, the better. So it's very, I guess it's reciprocal. We would benefit from having the community on our campus as much as the community would benefit from using the facility.
Yeah, one last point.
So given the number of seniors that would have to vote for this, would it make any sense to create a Nauset Senior Center in that school?
I'll answer the question kind of obtusely. The committee's heard me on many occasions say that we're building a school for students. We're also building a community center for an older population that I hear from a lot of folks. It's too far to walk, the parking's inadequate, and it's too dark. So in those respects, we have to take into consideration those public spaces. The public spaces have to be more accessible to a different generation. And that's part of the conversations we're having as we design the spaces moving forward. Yeah, there's no front door to the place. We understand that completely, and that was one of the faults of the last project. We didn't have the money or the resources to make that front entrance. So we'll correct that this time and make it more accessible to folks so that it can be used much more easily for folks. So I want to thank you all very much for coming tonight. I hope to see you at our next forum. I'm not sure what that's going to be, but it will be happening. And there'll be other forums in the other 3 towns. You can ask the board if you want.
Please leave your blue sky ideas and any priorities that you have at the end of the table.
By the way, the last project was
Go White Sox.
got it terminated.